She had that passion, and it took probably about 2 years, but after 2 years, I had that full-on passion, had an opportunity come to advance. I had to get certified. I got that certification. I never got that avenue because I was going to become a lead, never did become a lead. No, instead, within 4 months, I ended up becoming a supervisor instead.
Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of the healthcare industry committed to getting it right every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Michael Matthews, Hank Balch, and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. He has over 33 years in the medical and sterile processing field, and in 2011 started Central Sterilization Solutions along with his partner James Hoxie to teach the CRCST course for technicians desiring a true career in sterile processing. They've experienced an increase in the average pass rate going from 65% to a 95% pass rate on technicians' first attempts. CSS has also contracted with sterile processing departments to help hospitals with issues identified by the Joint Commission and other accreditation organizations correct those deficiencies and obtain clearance upon reinspection. CSS is also in the process of creating course curriculums for the CIS, CHL, and CER certifications offered by ISHM. This is part 2, gentlemen, with Harry. A lot of energy in part 1. I know it's going to pick right back up where it left off here for part 2. Excited to get into a little bit more about is the next step higher education, leaping off of a topic that we discussed with Cara Netto back in April with the issuance of her annual salary survey for sterile processing. So again, this is going to be another excellent episode. Looking forward to talking with Harry again.
Absolutely. Segment 1 was a lot of fun, a lot of great information. As we expected, there's a lot of passion there from Harry, and so I'm really excited to get into what's coming next in education for sterile processing.
Well, guys, y'all know I'm a huge data fan, and one of the specific topics that I want to, put Harry on the spot, if you will, is on this question of certification as it relates to data. Do we have the data to support this mission toward certification? And if we do or we don't, what impact does that have for the opportunity for higher education at the associate's level or at the bachelor level? And what does that mean for our industry? Can't wait to get into that with him today.
All right, as a reminder, you can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info. You can find us on Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, as well as LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean. The Instagram page is Beyond Clean Podcast. And if you do want to post a picture anonymously on the Instagram page, or if you've got a recommendation for a future guest or topic on the show, simply send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We'll be right back with Harry Mullen. Before we get started with the interview, Beyond Clean had an excellent turnout for our first ever panel discussion at the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo entitled Packaging Method Myth-Busting. Our expert panelists for the event included Marcia Frieze from Case Medical, Joe Hannibal from Halyard Health, and Barbara Harmer from Innovative Sterilization Technologies. Very shortly, we will be releasing the audio from the event in a 2-part series and want to thank the following sponsors for helping make the event possible. Northfield Medical. The new Northfield is focused on hospital operating room device repair management. With millions of medical device repairs a year, they help hospitals make data-empowered decisions on capital purchases, sterile processing procedures, and staffing. They provide surgical and diagnostic equipment repairs that meet OEM standards and consultation on repair trends, true program cost, and measurement baselines that improve outcomes and supply chain efficiencies. Ascendco Health, your data, cleansed completely, organized intelligently, and visualized brilliantly. Ascenco is an emerging health tech company changing the conversation, enabling sterile processing to achieve and sustain peak performance. Take your first step and contact co-founder and CEO Brian Reed. The team at Beyond Clean is very big on data and analytics, and Ascenco is doing some amazing things. I would encourage you to learn more. LogicQuip. LogicQuip provides hospital-grade storage equipment to any department in the hospital and specializing in CAD design, space utilization, and inventory optimization. Ready Set Surgical automates the surgical vendor supply chain. Their cloud-based coordination platform consolidates logistics and communication for all members of the surgical team to ensure that every patient has the right equipment with complete documentation at the right time. And finally, Ultra Clean Systems, Inc., born out of a need to provide healthcare facilities with better, more reliable ultrasonic cleaners for their sterile processing departments. Ultra Clean has been leading the industry with efficient designs that provide the most throughput while enhancing patient safety. Ultra Clean also produces Newsflash, a weekly digital newsletter covering a variety of interesting topics relating to sterile processing and infection control, plus new emerging and medical technology, as well as links to Isham State chapter events and CEU courses. Newsflash also offers a feature article every other week with none other than Hank Balch called The Front Line. Please subscribe to this unique newsletter. Register at ultracleansystems.com under the Newsflash tab. It's free. We're here with Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. Harry, in part one, we talked a lot about the fact that you're really just a couple steps away from becoming a technical college. And not too long ago, we spoke with Cara Netto from Healthcare Purchasing News, looked at some interesting statistics in the salary article that she put out in HPN's April edition. And some of it really pointed to the fact that while certification doesn't necessarily equate to an increase in salary, higher education certainly has. So let's talk about that. Let's explore that topic and start with just what the California hospital requirements are for sterile processing technicians, especially because you just were talking in part one about the fact that really, because of liability concerns, a lot of that training on the job and students being in the hospitals wound up being pulled back as time went on. And so now it's almost like higher education is forming itself to meet that need.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as far as the requirements from hospitals, I mean, here in California, the difference between one hospital system and the other in their requirements is it's wide. You'll have some hospitals that will stick to the guns and say that we need at least minimum certification along with a minimum of 2 years experience. You'll have some that say certification or 2 years experience. You'll have some that don't even require certification, but they want 3 to 5 years of experience. Now the pay, I mean, that is huge in a difference between, again, from one system to another. I mean, here in Southern California, you can have technicians starting out at $14 to $15 to start at one location, and literally, let's say 10 to 15 miles down the road, you have others that are making $21 to $22 to start, and then you have the next county over that they're making $25 to $28 to start. I think the hospital systems, they all need to get together and come to an agreement and say, you know what, I think, really look at the what it is that they're wanting to pay, as well as what it is that they're really looking for in technicians. Now, luckily for students coming into the program, I tell them apply for everything. It doesn't matter if, so long as you have that certification, apply, because it really, HRs, they put those requirements, and it's up to the manager as to whether or not they're going to want to interview you. But I mean, it's really confusing because literally all you have to do is just go on to, let's say, jobs.com or Indeed, and you'll see the requirements, and they differ, and it drives people crazy, and it drives me crazy.
You're not the only one, Harry. I think I can speak for Mike as well. As a sterile processing leader, it is always a challenge getting across to HR exactly the types of folks that we're looking for who we think would make good sterile processing technicians. And you're right, you can go across the street to the hospital and they're going to have a different point of view. 2 years experience or maybe 6 months with certification. It's that same struggle depending on the state and the region that you're in. Speaking, though, about this whole certification question, we alluded to it in the first segment. Even though attorneys may be getting smart and asking about these protections as it relates to infection control that come through certified technicians, in reality, there is still a striking lack of hard data that is tying an increase in certified sterile processing technicians to a decrease in any safety or quality related event, such as bioburden making it to the OR or a decrease in surgical site infections. There has just never been a study done. And we talked to Jim Stabinsky early on in the podcast about, I call it the landmark study that he's done as it relates to nursing certification in the OR. And the presentation that he made, I guess it was about 2 years ago now, that was tying that same stat. He was arguing that his study has shown, and it's early study, he'll admit that, but he says that they have seen in their own data, with an increase in certified OR nurses, you see a decrease in surgical site infections. And I think that is just busting open the door for our industry also to say, listen, is it time to take this opportunity to study our own success rates in what we're trying to do with all this, which ultimately, yes, we want to push professionalism and growth, but ultimately the goal is to protect the patient. And if that's not happening, or if we can't show that with the data, it doesn't mean that what we're doing is wrong. It just means that we need to do what we're doing better. I was wondering if I can get your thoughts on that.
Coming from my point of view, it's kind of like a loaded question or a loaded gun there, because honestly, although I'm pushing for certification, number one, I demand, even though when I have a technician coming in and applying, I really don't care if they have 5 to 10 years of experience. If they don't have that certification, I don't even want to talk to them. And it's because it's first of all, you have to hold yourself accountable to your career. And having that certification, number one, tells me that you have a certain level of knowledge as well as concern and a passion. And I let students know that, having that certification does not necessarily mean that you're not going to make mistakes. It doesn't mean that surgical site infections are going to go down. It goes beyond that. Certification, as much as it absolutely is needed, because I've seen hospitals that don't have certifications, they have low surgical site infections and hardly any occurrences from happening from sterile processing. And I've also seen facilities that have a high number of certified techs, but they have a higher number of surgical site infections and or errors that come from sterile processing. And what it comes down to is accountability. Unfortunately, here in California on the left coast is, we have to be concerned with the feelings of the staff member as opposed to being more concerned with customers, the patient. I listened to the podcast with Jim, and I was actually really inspired. It was great to hear that information. And yes, I absolutely believe that's like a foundation that's going to help us to start winning that argument. But part of the other part of it is also managers on top of the certification, making sure that they're not only adhering to making sure that their staff are certified to make, but also adhering to standards, the AAMI standards or what the CDC has put out or the FDA or what are the manufacturers saying, and following all of those steps and change the culture. Again, certification is not something that's going to solve everything. The difference I can tell you, though, between a non-certified tech and the difference between a certified tech is that I have found, and I'm not saying this necessarily because I've seen it, and I have seen it, but it's from personal experience. It took 20 years for me to get my certification. And during that 20 years, I was one of those people that had a chip on my shoulder. why do I need to be certified? I know more than the technicians that are certified coming into this field. It wasn't until I had a certified tech who was brand new in our facility, brand new out of school, that was challenging me. And she was telling me, you're doing that wrong. Well, who are you to tell me I'm doing it wrong? And it was like, that chip. But I'm like, if you could show me in writing. And so she took some time. She looked it up, and she brought it to me, and she showed it to me in writing. Okay, so I changed my way on that particular point. So she told me I was wrong again on something else. Show it to me in writing. It took her probably about 7 times before she finally would come to me and was getting ready to tell me I was wrong. And then when I was about ready to say that, well, show it to me in writing, she'd pull it out and she'd point to it. And then something started finally happening after that 7th point. The fact that she wouldn't let up and she wouldn't allow me to, just because I wasn't certified, to endanger patients. And actually, and that's what I was doing. I hate to admit it, but that's what I was doing. Because at the time, I didn't care, because I tried to make it in the field to advance, and I was too stupid to really think of the fact that I needed that certification. So she started lighting a fire. I finally ignited the passion in me because I saw that passion in her, and I have empathy. And what my empathy usually does is that the feelings going around me, I pick up on them. And she had that passion. And it took probably about 2 years, but after 2 years, I had that full-on passion, had an opportunity come to me to advance. I had to get certified. I got that certification. I never got that avenue because I was going to become a lead. Never did become a lead. No, instead, within 4 months, I ended up becoming a supervisor instead. That certification, again, is not necessarily something that is going to guarantee what happens in the department, but I guarantee you that a certified tech has a higher probability of advancing. So, okay, you're wanting to go into the field and you want to make money, well, get those certifications. Get that knowledge, though. I mean, you can have all the certifications in the world. It doesn't mean anything if you can't back it up with the knowledge. I had the knowledge before, so I thought, until that one technician was willing to not take my answers, at face value, and she challenged me. So I say that out to the hospitals as well. You need to get your staff certified. You need to move forward and tell them they need to be certified. But you need to send them to also the seminars out there. It's not enough just to have the in-services in-house, because they need to meet other people and get out there and see what's available and meet other people with the same passion. And eventually, we will change the culture. I kind of digressed on that, fellas. I'm sorry.
No, that's great, because it really does bring up a really important point, that because there are no studies that have been done that correlate certification with better patient outcomes, there is a lot of pushback on hospitals, and we're all very, very quick to jump on the hate train for hospital administrators who don't really get behind certification, or they don't get behind sending their people to the ISHM conferences or the seminars or anything like that. But from their perspective, they've got every department in the hospital who wants something. And at a certain point, they have to say, all right, if we're going to spend money on this, show me what it's worth. And I think that as long as we aren't able to quantify what all of us who have been out in the field know, we all know that a certified tech is more than likely going to be better than a non-certified, not universally, but the odds are that they're going to be better. We've all experienced that, but the lack of data makes it very difficult to go and argue that point to administration.
The one thing is that gratefully I notice in California, though, again, these hospital systems, even before California, and I think we're years away in California from any type of mandatory certification, but hospitals are taking the time to study it themselves. I think the group in the hospital that has been an advocate of all the sterile processing I've worked for, infection prevention, those nurses are a godsend, because they understand that certification is important, because it's the foundation. It's not the be-all, it's just the foundation to build a better department in sterile processing. And so because of those nurses, hospitals are now are opening up their eyes and agreeing with them and moving forward with the certification long before California will even mandate it. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, Harry, too, and as Kara's article in Healthcare Purchasing News highlighted, the growth really happens with credentials. Now, those credentials can come through certification. We've only, this entire episode, we've been talking primarily about those entry-level certifications, the CRCST. But as we all know, there's multiple certifications out there for both of those certification organizations. And the more of those you get behind your name, and the more knowledge, as you said, not just the letters, but the knowledge to go with those credentials, the better prepared someone is to walk into a department in need of help and redirection, and also to walk into that interview and be prepared to sell themselves in a way that's going to get them a lot more money at the end of the day than is trying to work hard year after year as a technician and hoping for a 3 to 5% raise every year. Like, if your mission is to grow, which, not everyone's is, and it's fine, but if you're in this industry and you want to grow and ultimately you want to grow your paycheck, the path to that in the status quo is to maximize your certifications and credentials in the industry. And secondarily, and this is kind of where we're going with this segment, is a future may be a more higher education related technical college, even as you brought up earlier, a true degree at the associate's level or even at the bachelor level that you can walk in and say, okay, I've got some hardcore microbiology under my belt. I've got process improvement at a true holistic sterile processing related degree. Again, going back to the salary survey, you see huge jumps in up to $10,000 plus in folks who are walking into these opportunities with a higher education degree behind their name and those credentials. There's really no comparison yet, but there's also no opportunity. All of these higher education credentials, it's folks like me, who had an undergraduate in agriculture. It's not related to our field necessarily. I think there's a big opportunity out there, and I guess, to get your insight, how close do you think we are in the U.S. to developing something like a sterile processing college program?
That is $1 million question, and that is something that people like us, we need to advance that question. We need to go in that direction. And going back to what you're saying, getting the advanced certifications, I'm proud to say, like you, Hank, is that I'm one of, we're a very few out of all the certified techs to have the grand slam of the certifications, all 4 of them, with ISHM. And it got to a point, the CRCST got me to a certain point. Just having that initial certification, I was able to increase my income within a matter of probably about 4 years, probably about 50%. Went on to get the other 2, the CIS, CHL, to have the Triple Crown from ISHM. And then, of course, this last year we got CER. But CER hasn't done anything for me yet. But as far as having those 2 additional certifications, from where I started in management and when I first got my certification in 2008 to now, I've more than doubled my income within 10 years. And people need to realize those certifications are so important. To a point, what I've seen, they're even more important than advanced degrees. And I have my advanced degrees in business administration, business management. And I can tell you that the hospitals and the positions that I've taken didn't even look at the degrees. They were more concerned with my certifications that I held. That's what they were looking for, and that's what got me, was able to negotiate the rates that I'm able to get now. And literally, I'm sure like you, Hank, we can go out to almost any hospital and apply, and I'm like 90% sure that I'm going to be getting the job offer. I just walk out with that confidence and stuff, knowing that I have the advanced certifications, I have them all, but I had that experience as well. I can back it up. And, as we all know, we don't know everything. There's so much to know in sterile processing, we can't possibly know it all. Part of getting those advanced certifications and going in, having to get those points, guess what? You can't get all those points in your in-services at work. You need to go to those seminars. You need to go to the conference, the ISHM conference, and the regional seminars from the chapters in, like in California and Texas and all over, because you get to meet those people and you get to see who else, those individuals who, by talking to them, that, my goodness, this person knows more about this particular section of sterile processing than I do. I get their numbers. I become friends with them, and I have so many contacts throughout the United States that I can call up anybody and be able to ask them a question, and if they don't know the answer, they know somebody who does know the answer. And typically, with usually no more than 72 hours, I've gotten the answer that I needed. That has made me a resource to my hospital that's invaluable. Now, going into the college degree, we need at least starting off with something like an associate's degree. And now that you mention it, I may roll myself over to to contacting some of the like the junior colleges and stuff and see what they have available and see if this is something that they're wanting to do. It's where we need to go, especially at one point in this segment you guys talked about those individuals that don't want to advance, and I tell people, hey, you have those technicians that have been a tech for 30 years. They never became a lead. They didn't want to do anything else, and God bless them because we needed them. We needed those. They were the foundations of our department. They're the ones that taught me and passed on their knowledge because their passion was solely to be a technician. But there's those individuals like myself that it was like, okay, knowing the information, being able to do the job is not enough. I want to have more influence on my industry. And education, certifications, advanced degrees, that's how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Forget about the hospitals. Okay, are they paying the technicians more money? You want more money, get those certifications. You'll be able to get the more advanced positions like leads. We have 30 years ago, all we had in the career ladder was technician, lead, supervisor, and if you had your degree, you could become a manager. Just in the last 7 years, I've seen where you have clinical coordinators, those lead technicians in the department that don't oversee people, they oversee processes. They mirror the positions up in the OR, like the orthopedic clinical coordinator or the neurology or vascular systems educators. When I worked at UCLA, I was the first system educator for the 5 departments that I oversaw. They decided they needed it. I applied for it, and I actually didn't even apply for it. I applied for the manager position. And they were like, you know what, we think you'd be better off as an educator. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, so speaking of education, I do want to get from you as an educator, not only in the hospital space, but also in the sterile processing programs. Where do you feel like, in terms of content and curriculum, our existing certification content is weak? Or a nice way to say, where's there opportunity for improvement? Where are those areas that you like to focus and highlight in your own programs? And even if there were someone out there who were to build a college-level associate's degree, what would they have to highlight to really make this something that will be profitable and beneficial to someone walking into a hospital and really have this knowledge behind them?
One, or maybe it's 2 words, critical thinking. That is where there's nothing in any of the programs for sterile processing certifications that I've been able to see, at least as far as starting off with the CRCST. When these technicians are going into these fields, they are going in technically blind, and they just take for face value what is given to them. And so that could be good information being taught to them or bad information being taught to them. But what is not being taught in the courses or in any course, when they're going into these fields, that needs to be there is critical thinking processes. To be able to teach them, and I've talked to my own children. My children are adult now. They've gone through college, and I asked them, what the subjects did they ever teach you critical thinking? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? What do you mean critical thinking? I think every day. Well, no. It's like when you come across a problem, it's not just a matter of just picking up mud, throwing it up against the wall, and seeing what sticks. I mean, you have to be able to think through a process. It's kind of like going through, part of that is like doing root cause analysis, working your way back from the problem to pinpoint where you might think this was the problem, but you're going backwards and you come to find out something completely different was the issue, and that is not being taught. I do see it being presented now at conferences. We have vendors out there that support sterile processing greatly that are coming up with critical thinking topics, but it needs to be in the curriculum.
Harry, what's really interesting about that critical thinking is when I went to nursing school, that's all they talked about was critical thinking, and so much so that even the way that they designed the tests where there is no one right answer, there's multiple right answers, and you have to choose the best right answer, so they even tried to test you on your critical thinking skills that way. And when you look at maybe this higher education, et cetera. If we want to emphasize critical thinking, you almost would expect that that would become part of a associate's or a bachelor's. And one of the questions that we kind of had, really our final question, was how would that impact the legislation efforts around getting certification? And I'm going to go right back to nursing school and say, it's great that I got my undergraduate degree, but I still had to go past my boards, and those were still testing my critical thinking skills. I would assume, and I would love to get your take, I would assume that if you wind up requiring some sort of associate's program in sterile processing, that would only enhance legislative efforts to get certification to be required, because essentially it would be like passing your nursing boards.
Exactly. Right now, as the status quo and the way we're going, we're making small inroads. The association has been, and the lawyers in the few states that we do, been able to push the concept of mandatory certification, and they've had those successes. But you have to create a snowball effect. You have to get that momentum. And going back to what the course is lacking, the curriculum is lacking, I go back to that critical thinking, that if you can put that in there, so that way you can impact the legislator to know that, say, hey, we're not just talking about getting people to have, take a test to say they know how to do it. We're talking about putting people in the field that can protect the patient, because they have the wherewithal, that their center of focus is the customer. And of course, in our field, we think, well, yeah, that's the OR, that's labor and delivery. No, it's not. It's the patient. If you're not focused on the patient, then you're not focused at all. If you're not thinking of how to improve processes and solve problems, then why are we even bothering to try to move forward?
So many technicians don't have the background and the knowledge that's built into the curriculum for them to understand how it would impact the patient. That's kind of a connect-the-dots scenario that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, and luckily in part of my curriculum, on almost every chapter, I always turn it around to think about your job, set the standard, be the problem solver. Don't just go to the manager. Part of, even a small step of critical thinking is don't just go to the manager saying, hey, I have a problem, I need you to fix it. No, go to the manager and say, I have a problem and I think I have a solution, because I do the job every day and it just seems natural to me that we should probably move in this direction. And if we can get our technicians to that level and be able to explain to the legislators that we're not just getting certified technicians, we're getting people who are able to think that on their feet, that when you are on the operating room table and your life is in danger, you not only have the surgeon, the circulator, surgical tech, you also have the sterile processing tech there to support you, to make sure that you have the best outcome you can have, because they have the tools they need to do the job.
Harry, the time went by super fast. Excellent interview. Lots of great content. It's a two-part series, as we discussed. We're wrapping the second part here. I just wanted to say once again, great to meet you at ISHM in person. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I didn't even realize how much structure you had put into your program and how poised you are for whatever comes next in this industry. Kudos to you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
That was Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. That wraps up a two-part series with Harry, and we really took a super deep dive into higher education. And guys, I even think we gave Harry kind of a business model idea, because in part one, we talked about how much money some of these programs were getting for their individuals to go through the training program. I'm almost thinking it's such an easy step to go to an associate's. It might not be as far around the corner as we realize.
That's very true, Justin. And the topic specifically that we brought up with Harry on this segment was the scope of content. These certifications, they focus on very specific curriculum, but if we're looking at this from the higher education level, what would be required to build in an associate's or a bachelor level program? And of course, he highlighted critical thinking. Huge need there, not only for technicians, but also for leaders to be able to walk into a troublesome context and situation, identify the areas that need improvement, and then be able to bring initiatives forward to make that change. That is what we need for this industry. That's what's going to push us forward. And I'm super excited that he had the opportunity to highlight that today for the listeners.
Yeah, Hank, and I mean, this series of interviews really got to hit on a number of our soapboxes. You know, you think about the number of interactions that it had just with, you know, our own podcast, and then the conversations that we've had off the podcast about, you know, where we're going as an industry. And I think that a lot of us are starting to see that movement towards the need for data related to how much is a certification worth to a hospital, and then what is the next step. You know, this was a great couple of interviews.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. If you do have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you'd like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.